allow me to get started on the first panel that we'll have today. For that, I need to welcome a few people to the stage, and let me do that right away so that we can have them here as I introduce them. Here we go. That is 2. Here we are. And now I have all the people I need on stage. Allow me first to introduce Petra de Ruiter. Petra, welcome. You are the Chief Operating Officer at Transavia. And I can't say that I can only say that we're super excited to have you joining us today for the discussion on the future of travel. Welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
And next to her, we have Professor Brian King, Associate Dean at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Brian, good morning. Welcome. And last but not least, to make sure that all of this goes smooth and as smoothly as possible, we've invited an experienced moderator, Caroline Wieging, who's equally a senior researcher at the Hotel School The Hague. And with that, Caroline, I would like to give the floor to you and take us away on this first conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, for your kind introduction. I'm really happy to moderate this interview with those top professionals in the field of tourism. Welcome, Petra de Ruiter. Welcome, Professor King. How will tourism recover in a resilient way? Let's approach it from 3 perspectives: consumers, the role of government, and of course, the industry boardrooms as well. But just let's start with the consumer. Mr. Ruiter, Petra, you don't doubt at all that consumers will be traveling again, do you?
I must say, don't doubt at all that sounds too sure. But indeed, I have experienced over the last few decades that also we thought they might not be coming back, they came back. But to make sure that we know what is going to happen, we also do our research. And since the COVID period, as Transavia, we have done a monthly research with our customers, and we asked them, do you intend to travel? Are you looking? And what is important if you want to travel? And I just looked at our latest review, and then we see that 60% of our customers is still willing to go to travel by aircraft this summer, and 23% is actually booking. And to be honest, we yesterday launched our winter schedule, which means that in the systems, we opened up travel for November until March next year. And we had 33,000 bookings in one day, which is nearly the level of 2019. So it looks that at the moment, we're really looking forward to travel again.
Yeah, that's nice. And you do already have your first test travel experience where you cooperate.
Yes, indeed. Here in the Netherlands, we have the so-called field labs, and that's a test environment where you try if you can visit a concert again and if you can go to the theater. And we have organized together with the tour operator a trip to Rhodos, where people are tested before they travel. All the crew is tested, the crew in the hotels are tested, and they stay there for a week on their bed next to the swimming pool because they're not allowed to go off-site the property of the hotel and then travel back with us. And indeed, we had 25,000 people who wanted to travel. Unfortunately, we had only 189 seats available, and that was really full in a day. So I think I also recognize that myself. I cannot wait to get some experiences again and to feel the passion of seeing other countries and the sun on my skin. And I see that indeed that people are really interested in coming back.
Yeah. What you told me as well is let's say the sentiment and the way people where they really think it's important. The health issue, how is it changing? Is it where do people really
Yeah, to be honest, at the beginning, we thought that the short-term change would be on health, that we as an airline should really take care of that to make sure that people gain again trust to travel. But looking at the list on what people find important to decide if they're going to book or not, we see on number 1, the guarantee that they can still change their booking, so based on the actual situation. On the second point, that they can choose their date and their destination. Then third, a cheap fare. And then on a fifth, the information about the country. So what is the situation like in the COVID? And then on the last point, at the moment we have a clean aircraft, a mask and things like that. So you really see that more or less people get used to the situation that they need to wash their hands, they have to wear a mask and be careful with that, and go back to flexibility and cheap fares.
So this will be the future of traveling, Professor King. How do you see this?
Well, so Petra was sounding very optimistic there, which is great. We love optimism, but let me just bring you all to Hong Kong for a moment and tell you two different situations. In Hong Kong, our tourism is 99% down, so we have nothing happening with our 7.5 million people. Just at the end of the MTR, we have mainland China, where the domestic aviation is almost back to where it was last year. So over Easter, revenues are down for the airlines, but the volumes are pretty much back to 29. So mainland is almost back to, in some ways, the same mobilities. But Hong Kong, because of its experience of handling COVID-19 with the really tough border controls, our travel industry is dormant at the moment. All we have is staycation. We have a very vibrant, our 7.5 million people are all traveling around Hong Kong, staying in hotels, and they've got cabin fever. So as Petra said, yes, there's huge pent-up demand. The Hong Kong people are dying to go to even to Macau next door, which is only 50 kilometers away. They can't go there at the moment. We've had travel bubble. We almost had a travel bubble with Singapore, but just at the last minute, we had 1 or 2 new cases came up. So the sentiment in Hong Kong is very enthusiastic about getting traveling again. However, another reality, I had my second vaccination earlier this week, but I'm one of only 4% of people in Hong Kong that have had a second vaccination. Maybe 8% have had one vaccination so far. So we've got a very slow take-up rate. And so, look, there's in mainland, there's plenty optimism. In Hong Kong, the consumer sentiment is positive, but some of the practical realities about border closures, getting things smoothed out, we've still got some way to go in this part of the world.
Yeah, so that's not only the, let's say, the demand side, but also the supply side should work.
Yes, well, there's very few flights in and out, so 99% down at the moment. However, I don't want to give a pessimistic picture. I guess what I'm just saying is in Asia Pacific, it's very patchy. So, some places, great optimism. You've got the new travel bubble between Australia and New Zealand starting this weekend. That one is looking quite good. Domestic travel in Australia is really picking up. So Qantas are doing pretty well. And long haul's much more of a problem. So in Asia Pacific, it's quite a patchy situation. We're optimistic, but there's a lot of pitfalls on the way.
Yeah. So corridors, testing, safe havens, this will be the future of tourism, Petra?
Yes, I think so. I agree there with Brian, and maybe it's good to add that if I talk about Transavia, we are a leisure airline flying in Europe, which I think is now an industry which is, or the part of the industry which is hit very, very hard. But a lot of research shows also that leisure within the known area is the first one to pick up again. But I also see the operational difficulties at the moment. How do we start up again? But also in contact with our government, because there's a lot of rules being spread out over us. And I agree them and I understand them. And I understand also that customers need it to feel safe. But it's very difficult because the airline industry, like, for example, also the hotel industry, is an international industry. And what you see is legislation per country.
Mm.
And we have, for example, in the airline industry, IATA, the body who tries to help us to look at it from an international perspective or from a European perspective. But I don't see a lot of success on that part. I see every single country making their own rules, making their own test policies. For example, the Netherlands was the only country who asked for a 4-hour-old PCR test before you fly back from the country into the Netherlands. And then suddenly Spain had to organize test stations at 3 o'clock in the morning, because we fly out at 7 o'clock in the morning, because you had to do your test. And I understand it from a government perspective, but that is in practice really, really difficult. And also the consumer, they don't understand anymore that for Portugal, for example, you need a test when you're 2 years old as a kid. For Spain, it can be 6 years old. And for Belgium, I think they've gone open again last night. And that is really difficult, I think, for the companies to adapt. And also, who is going to check at the gates if you have a green flag? Either you have a good PCR test or a vaccination. Is that the airline who's going to say no, that you cannot go on board? Is that the airport, or who is it going to be? So I see a lot of challenges ahead, and also consumers not having a lot of patience with that. We have to organize it and that it goes smooth and that they know what is going to happen. So yeah, I'm on that side of the coin. I'm a little bit more pessimistic.
Yeah, thank you. So there comes the role of government in. In Europe, we face a patchwork of measures and restrictions. Is there an Asian alternative for it, Brian? So your country or the Asian countries do have experience on SARS and how this had an impact. Could we learn from it?
Yes and no. So yes, the part is that the community here have learned from SARS. So people wear masks, they do hand hygiene, all that type of thing. So community's been good. But because SARS was over fairly quickly, you can't take the lessons too far. And in a way, the government's tried to do it the SARS way, but it's killed the travel industry. So from a health point of view, we've had very few deaths. The number of cases is quite modest. But look up, the take-up rate is now very low, and the industry is 99% down. So yes, some lessons learned, but each situation is different, and we're having to learn as we go along this time. So it's certainly not the model answer, and the government here is muddling through. We've got new bubbles happening in bars and restaurants, which is causing total confusion amongst the hotel and catering sector here. So yes, it's always helpful to have prior experience, but it doesn't mean you're going to do it right the second time, unfortunately.
No. Are there any good examples how government can help us out of this tourism crisis?
Look, I think Australia and New Zealand are doing, there's different approaches. China has been incredibly tough, and now Hong Kong is opening up to people from mainland without vaccination because there are no cases. So China's been really tough, which is not good from an individual rights point of view, but does allow the industry to get moving faster. In Australia, the government's been a different kind of tough, which has caused huge frustration to an industry that was impacted by bushfires and so on. But what you see is second time around that travel bubble between Australia and New Zealand about to happen. Notwithstanding the frustrations, it looks like you've got a whole continent that's now opening up, and then across the Tasman. So they've kind of mixed Western style democracy, you know, people protest and hate the government, and then, you know, there's a lot of disagreement and even different approaches state by state. But then you've got, at least in this case, it goes back to Petra's point, it's very hard to get this total harmonization, but you can get maybe between the two governments, build trust, get them to work with health, travel industry, airlines, IATA, IKEA, all these ones collaborating together. And I think we need more of these good examples to give us the confidence, so that when we can go out to the world as the travel and hospitality industry and speak with confidence and say, look, here's showing evidence of working well together.
Thank you. Yeah, Petra, how is it to be in the boardroom of a airline these days? So what keeps you awake at night? What is on the agenda of your boardroom to really be a resilient airline to get out of this crisis?
Maybe to answer it twofold. First, the personal story. How is it to be in a boardroom? That actually depends from day to day. There are some days where I really think, whoa, this is interesting. How lucky am I that I'm at least in an industry where you, in the sense, really hard, because you really learn from it. You have challenges which I've never experienced before. Although I already worked for 20 more years in the airline industry, this is really unprecedented. But there is also times where I think, when is this going to stop? I'm working for an airline, and I have been on an airport, I think 2 months ago. And if I'm at the airport, there's nobody there. And it's really surreal. So my own mood swings go up and down. And if I then go to the content of the boardroom, I think it's more or less the same way. It's the challenge between the short term and the long term. So if you ask me the 3 main topics which are on our agenda, the first one is at the moment cash, survival. How do we keep existing as a business? Because let's be honest, if Transavia or KLM didn't have the financial support of the government, we would not have been here anymore. And it's really strange as a board member that you're suddenly looking at invoices of, let's say, 1,000, 2,000 euro, which you approve one by one. And before this period, I really looked at the invoices, which were, I don't know, 50 or 80,000 euro or even more. Then secondly, we are looking at flexibility, agility. How can we be agile to look outside what is happening and be able to adjust and adapt to that? Not only as an airline, but also as a person. Let's be honest, we have people working in planning who like to have certainties and make their planning. I can tell you, they've done certain plannings for 10, 20 times, and they also have to live with the uncertainty and be agile to adjust to that. And the third one is more the long term, because let's be honest, this is a pandemic. What is going to be the next one? And we already know that sustainability is something which is with us, and we really need to do something with it. So although you're really short-term focused and how much money do you have, we also cannot afford not to think about the future. How do we get more sustainable? What is going to be the future of low fare flying? What is the future of point-to-point flying? What do we need to adapt? How do we do more electrification? And that's really difficult, because those topics ask to invest money and to invest time, invest knowledge, and to work with partners. But we cannot afford not to do it, because if we only focus on the short time, then maybe we survive this year, but then we have an issue for the future. So I would say that is a quick overview of our boardroom discussions.
Thank you. Complicated times. Is there a golden formula, Professor King, for the future of tourism companies? New business models? How do you see it? Can we learn? Are there any research already in place for it?
Okay, several parts to that question. Look, the golden formula, no, it's a bit context specific, of course. You know, mainland China, this part of the world, you get very different. When you look across Asia, India, Hong Kong, they're all a little bit different. You've got SMEs, you've got large corporations, you've got legacy carriers, you've got AirAsia. we have incredible diversity in our industry. Okay, so what's the commonality? We are a people industry. So a health crisis is a people crisis, and it affects our customers, it affects our leaders, it affects our frontline staff. So I think that, I'm not sitting in the boardroom like Petra, but I am having conversations with people that are in boardroom. And I agree with the bit about well-being. I think, every person in a boardroom needs to care about their own health, because that spills across to, we must care about our communities and take care of our own health. So it's a reminder in tourism hospitality that we're a people industry, and without that, we're not going anywhere. We can't suddenly become a technology industry. We're a people-based industry. So our corporations, in embracing purpose-driven, yes, we need the sustainable development goals and address climate change and so on, but we need the well-being of people at the center of that. So employees, customers, communities, and somehow to then communicate that more widely. In Hong Kong, we have travel industry people. This is the zero industry operations at the moment, operating our vaccination centers. So they're all being deployed. They've got great front-facing customer skills, and that's a reminder to the community about the value that we have from our people. So to me, the goal, we always talk about passion for hospitality, so that human part, albeit with a very strong health emphasis at the moment, and hygiene becomes really critical. A second point is our interdependencies. I know we're talking a lot about airlines here, but all parts of our industry, whether it's exhibitions, events, hotels, travel agents, OTAs, we're all interdependent. You rely on relationships. Again, that people part, of course, technology enhanced. And then maybe the final thing to mention about this in our part of the world, you've got China that's got targets of carbon neutrality, so big government plans. Now, so the question is, do I see that in the boardroom conversations? In this part of the world, we'd love all of our corporations to be more sustainable, to embrace climate change and so on. I see it very patchy in this part of the world. I'm somewhat heartened because China is at least driving hard on that, because then all the state-owned enterprises will follow. They'll do what they're told, and then the corporations are getting the message. And there's some great stories from the corporate sector about using this time to redefine their brand, to embrace purpose, purpose-driven, and in some cases even line up better with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Europe's probably more advanced, certainly more advanced, but different dynamic in this part of the world. Maybe final thing to mention, China, with this business back to where it was last year, is driving consumption. Okay, so this is all consumption driven, and so it's trying to get this right balance between sustainability and when you're driving growth and consumption at the same time. Not easy.
Interesting. I'm just wondering, Tom, are there any questions from the audience for our two experts on the stage?
Absolutely, absolutely. We had a question from Jan Huizing, and he asks, to what extent does the pandemic change Transavia's business model? Are there any fundamental changes?
Yeah, of course, we also had the sessions about never waste a good crisis. What should we do to make sure that we learn from this and we get better and fitter to the start line after this pandemic? I think, in a sense, the pandemic will not change the business model. I think the request for sustainability, indeed, to realize yourself that you are a people business and what are the people expecting from you in the future, that will change our business model, and that's where we're looking at. And yes, I would not be surprised if people for example, here in the Netherlands, people like their, I don't know, third or fourth holiday, just a weekend Barcelona, to have, I don't know, a drink at the Ramblas and then fly back again. You can question yourself if that will stay for the future. But as I said to you, Caroline, I think that we have seen now how rich we get once we visit other countries and build memories of ourselves and see what is happening. And I don't see that going away. We just have to do that in a different way. So yes, I think we need to change the business model in a way. Do I already know what way it's going to be? No, but we have to ask that every year again to make sure that we exist over a few years still.
Yeah, I think it's a very
answering.
comprehensive answer. Thank you. Any other questions, Tom?
Yeah, there was a question for Professor Brian King as well, and it says, in what way do you think that all these digital possibilities will change, between brackets, reduce, the amount of people that are traveling, e.g. for business or also combined with the increased focus of sustainability?
Okay. So there's different dimensions to this. I guess in Hong Kong, business travel is an important. Corporate travel is a big driver with conventions and so on. So many of you will be aware, Bill Gates says business travel will be down by 50%. So I guess he's got kind of a vested interest being a tech guy. And he's maybe a little bit at the extreme end of saying, you know, so much more business is going to be done online. Definitely hybrid is going to increase very substantially. So certainly in that business travel sector, there will be, particularly within corporations, a lot more people traveling around, attending meetings. It'll be done online. So just like Petra was saying, the short going to Benidorm for a drink, coming back at the weekend, same in business. I think businesses will be looking at a lot of that more transactional type travel and questioning its validity. So businesses that are providers that are over dependent on that kind of market will be hit. I think visiting friends and relatives is going to come back with a vengeance after once things, because that family, that social, our need to reconnect. So I look, a little bit of the discretionary, the long haul from Europe to New Zealand might start to be reduced a bit because of carbon emissions and costs and so on. So there'll be a bit of impact, but maybe not as much as on the business travel sector. So look, I think it depends on which segment of the industry that we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
I see that has sparked some discussion, because now all the questions are popping up in the chat. So that's a good sign, and it gives us some food for thought as well in the breakout rooms afterwards. I think we have a few more minutes left. So if you don't mind, Caroline, I would love to ask one more, like a few more questions. So there was a question for Petra, and she said Malta, or from Shikar Jagli, and she asks, Malta is giving 250 to 300 euros to tourists who spend at least 3 nights. And will tourists take the risk of traveling?
Yeah, in the end, we only know when people are going. So I can only do predictions based on the research we do, because to be honest, at the moment, we do not fly a lot. And the people who fly with us only have, as they call it, essential travel. So there is a reason they really need to go. But as I'm looking from the research we are doing, I think if people still have the money, because we're not sure how hard the economy will be hit, there is this wish for people to travel. And as you saw in the little list I quoted in the beginning, information and fares are more important at the moment than the fear of traveling. So I think the people who are willing to travel, yes, they will be interested by such offers. Of course, there's also a part of our population who is just too afraid, or who cannot afford it. So I'm not saying that in 2021 or 2022 we're back to the level of 2019. I don't think so. But I think there is a large majority still interested in traveling and going abroad, but then to places where they're well informed and where they know what they can expect.
I hear a nodding from Professor Brian King. I think that's agreeing,
Sure.
agreeing with that as well.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Maybe one final question, and then well, of course, we're going to slowly, surely move to the breakout rooms to fuel this discussion on a statement that I'm going to push you for, Caroline, as well. A nice statement to think of. The question comes from Dr. Erdogan Ikiz, who asks to you, Brian King. Before the pandemic, the Asian wave was in full swing. And what do you think will happen in Asia uniquely? What the rest of the world can learn from the Asian experience?
Oh, Erdogan, yes, okay. Oh, Asia is so complicated because every time you mention China with 1.4 billion, we have to talk about India with 1.4 billion, not to mention, the Middle East and so on. Look, I think we do, rather than Asia, I think probably China's where we need to look because the 1.4 billion people are back on the move. And whether it's sustainability, whether it's consumption, it's all happening already. And so we need to hope that that's going to rebound in a positive way. Now, I don't think that the Chinese market is going to go so quickly long haul. I think that Asia, like Europe, so this is more similarity, I think we'll be traveling a bit closer to home in the shorter term. I think gradually we'll be maybe moving a little bit further. And that Australia, New Zealand example, maybe that it then extends to Singapore. In China, Greater China, we're still dealing with the border to Macau and to Hong Kong and still trying to work that through. So I think Erdogan, rather than sort of Asia model, yes, Asia growth will come back, but very hard to generalize because India's got major issues just now with the pandemic. China does not have major issues. So how do we generalize from these two examples? But I think that the early resurgence of China market is something that's going to be of global significance, and hope we can do that well. The geopolitics, the carbon, all that. We need to make sure we do it well.
It's a complicated world. I learned from this 30 minutes. The idea was to answer the question, how will tourism recover? I don't think that the answer, there are some answers, some building blocks of the answer touched upon in this 30 minutes conversation. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much, Petra. And I just would like to finish with Petra's first statement. The desire to build memories by traveling will stay, but the travel industry will need to be better, safer, and more agile in delivering this product. That's this sort of, is a summary of this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caroline and Brian, for this. Maybe just to add a little bit to all the students and the people working for Hotel School The Hague, you have been looking at somebody who had her education at the Hotel School The Hague. So I can promise you, you're doing a very good thing, and you'll have a very good opportunity in life once you've had your education there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you all. And if there's people who want to continue the discussion on China, we'll do that tomorrow, because tomorrow we'll speak more extensively about that as well. Thank you, Caroline, for doing a fantastic job hosting here. And indeed, how will tourism recover? That's one of the most interesting questions. And now we come to one of the most, well, for me, one of the most exciting things, and I hope that you all will have the opportunity to enjoy it as much as we had in mind for you to enjoy it. We're going to the networking and to the breakout sessions, and that requires a little bit of explanation. Allow me to put myself in the middle of the stage so that everybody can see me, that if there are any questions. There we go.